And one of the things I would speak to is, kind of that John Eldredge framework I was talking about, the king stage he talks about from men that are in their 40s to 60s, right? And he talks about this stately stage where a man has reached the point, and I want to make this practical for sisters too, but this is a stage where a man has reached a point of character. He has wholeheartedness. His heart's been shaped enough to be entrusted with power, money, influence, right? We've got to work to get to that point, because sometimes we had to be tested to see what we could be trusted with. And some of us, if we're honest with ourselves as men, we know some of the things I ask God for, I'm not prepared for, I can't handle, and I will mess up. And so we have to cultivate a level of character and content, right? Where character says, if God gives it to me, this is the glory he's going to get. But content in saying, until then, I can work with what I got, because I know my capacity isn't completely there yet. And I think, and this is what I ask you to speak to, I think there's two things that factor into doing that stage well. I think our social circle plays into that significantly. I love knowing men that inspire me to do more. And if I'm honest, I'm competitive. I want to say that I showed my work. So you may work in mental health, but I want to show over here in transportation that I brought some numbers in this year. I'm be honest, even if I didn't get the bonus I wanted, I want to be able to say I started out with this goal and I accomplished it. And if you are a B student and you love hanging out with C- students, they make you feel good about yourself. Mm-hmm. But when you get around those A plus or the A- men, you're gonna say, he think he's something, man. I could do that too. And so I think your social circle helps. Because when you see this is what character looks like, this is what it looks like to maintain your devotional life, but then also having a young warrior to pour into. I saw you just took your son off to college, right? And so I think those two things all of us should work on today. Our social circle, loving other men. I really think I've learned in the last 10 years, I've had men in my life who would say, hey, I love you, bro. I just want to let you know. Men who could express their emotions and really build me up when I needed it, but also having others that I know my child is watching. There are young men that I care about that are watching, and I don't want to fall and damage their faith. I want to get you to speak to that, because I think you do great with relationships. Because when I talk to people, it's just like, oh, yeah, Jamal. And it's like a consistent story that you hear from people. How has that, impacted you having your social circle? Shout out to Kamari Ellis, and also your relationship with your son.
Well, I think, it's a number of things, man. And again, as we grow and mature in Christ, the language around what it is changes, right? Because we spiritualize it, knowing and having the affirmation of God that that's what it was, So, one, it has always been growing up in the projects and growing up in West Philly, important to have relationships that reflected loyalty, trust, vulnerability, family, and that circle in many cases can be small or big, depending on, again, who you are and who you're exposed to. But again, as I've matured in Christ, I've also learned that, it has, for me, been a mimic, not necessarily a model of how Jesus rolled, who he hung with and who he did not disassociate himself with because of who he was. Jesus could walk into any room and make relationship with anybody, and I feel that he's made me the same way, because I try to, and again, as I get older and mature in his word and try to walk in his ways, I have learned and am continuing to learn that we got to look at people through the eyes and the lens of how Jesus did. Now, that don't mean, you're going to have everybody in your inner circle. That doesn't mean that, you're going to have relationships with everybody that blossoms the same way, because that's just not a reality. Even for Jesus, people he thought that he came here and died for would be nailing him to the cross, and those were the things that, again, as we model our lives after Christ, our social circle should be that of such where we are discipling individuals. And how do you disciple unless you've been discipled? So you have to have something that you can give to those who are in your social circle. Jesus rode with the 12 apostles, and even with the 12 apostles, one of them betrayed him. You know what I mean? But he knew that that would happen. But even with what we know, does not limit how we are to expose ourselves to people. So, again, as I look back over that, the relationships that I've had, and again, call me naive or whatever, man, but I have more friends than I can count, and that is, I mean, genuine. You just mentioned Kamara, you mentioned Shalia, these are people that I went to high school with, but I call them friends, because of the relationship. We don't have to talk every day, we don't have to be in each other's presence every day, or, have, a Christmas dinner every year at one of our houses. We don't have to do that for me to call you friend, or because I know that if I need you, you're there. And even when I don't, you're there. Those are people that I consider my friends, and I am blessed by God to have those genuine relationships, number one. But also, what you said is true. I intentionally and even unintentionally want to make sure that, my brand is consistent with those people that are in my social circle. They know they can call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's something going on. We're going to talk it through, because it's not what you are going through, it's what we're going through if I call you a friend. And likewise, you know what I mean? I'm in a position of transition right now. I have friends that have called me and say, "Hey man, whatever you need, call me." And it's not about, what you got or what you drive and all those kinds of things. I am your friend. And if you need something, even if you don't need it, you got it. So those things are important in terms of your social circle, because you find out who your friends are when you're going through something, and you also find out who your friends are. So again, at that level, it's important for me to know who's in my social circle. And that don't mean all my black folks. I have a number of people who don't look like me that are in my corner the same way, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, my perspective, our perspective, they are there. So then when you roll that down to pouring into some other person or passing the baton to, whether it's my son or my sons, because I have a lot of non-blood related people that I will call my son because of mentorship, that and people that I pour into when they need me, or, otherwise when I'm giving guidance or counsel on things. But they need to see how I operate in my circle, right? Because that goes more than what I say. So when they see it and they realize it and they see the genuineness of that, again, I am just so blessed, man, because when my boys that I haven't seen in a long time are in the area, they might be in Indianapolis or Chicago or something like that. They're like, hey, man, I'm gonna drive through because we're coming through Ohio. I just want to stop through. They'll come through, and if we got time, I'll throw something on the grill, or we sit around and we have a couple drinks and sit and talk. But my children are exposed to the genuineness of the relationships. And then they hear the stories. Oh man, when me and your dad was at Dell State, or when we was in college, or when we was in high school, and it's just like, call me Uncle so and so. Going back to what I was saying about my neighborhood, because my boys are like my brothers, or the females that I went to school with that are like my sisters, they're their aunts. You know what I'm saying? So it goes back into, well, what does real relationships look like now that my son is off to college? And as he, extends himself and starts to network with people who live in Akron and Cleveland and all of these other areas of the state, now he's developing those relationships that I had when I was in school. So when I need a ride home, I jumped in the car with one of my boys that live in Delaware. They're like, are you only 30, 45 minutes away? I'll drop you off in Philly and then circle back. Wow. Or if I go anywhere in the country right now, I can go to or pick up the phone and say, yo, I'm in town for the weekend. Let's try to hook up and go out to dinner or something while I'm here at the very minimum. And if we can't, it's cool. But I know I can go to Maryland and any part of Maryland and probably find somebody. I know I can go to DC and I got boys there. I know I can go to Atlanta. It's just that level of comfort of showing how your social circle is very critical to your success. And then when you pass that down, it's better for them to see it than to say it, because they can only create in their mind a story around what you say versus what they see.